Hello viewers, welcome back to our YouTube channel, KC Accountants Education Center. And before we proceed with our ethics, because in the first video we looked at the corporate governance, but as I told you, you don't need to go through the whole corporate governance, because corporate governance is a topic that you will drill so much when you go to auditing and assurance. But here we just want, we shouldn't go much of the corporate governance, because it's a little that we need. As long as we understand what corporate governance is, we understand how, like, the advantages and disadvantages of corporate governance. That's how basic the examiner can bring it. But you also have to know that most of the times they bring in a scenario way. That's why I first gave you a scenario, or I've first shared for you a picture of the things that we should look at. But as I told you, before we go to ethics, I told you that there are key elements that you should note from the other side. We said that the non-executive director is supposed to be the chair, is supposed to be made the chairman, the chairperson or the chairman, board of director. 2, we should be having very many non-executive directors as opposed to executive directors, so that they can be able to bring in that kind of balance when they are doing their voting. We also spoke about the key people that pray or that made their recommendations. We spoke about the king, who was the high court judge in South Africa. After the apartheid, they looked at ways how they can be able to transform companies, and they made some, that judge made some recommendations from Judge 1, from King 1, that was the first report, to King 2, that was the second report. They kept on modifying those reports until they went up to King 3, which means report 3. We also talked about the fact that in Uganda we have the Institute of Corporate Governance that also provides some recommendations on how a company can be managed. We also spoke about the Commonwealth reports. We also talked about that we had the Chadibale report, but we concluded that the Chadibale report is taking the form of the Commonwealth report. So those are some of the highlights that we looked at in the previous video that are very basic and you need at least to understand. So now let's look at ethics. Now here the examiner may throw like 4 or 5 mark question, especially under the question 1, because I told you ethics and corporate governance plus Islamic finance, they are more seen in the question 1, section A. And these questions keep on coming. Most of the times the examiner doesn't examine a full question on corporate governance because it is more of theoretical. It is more theoretical than computational. So it's not going to be a full question. So you can't have a full question on ethics. But as a finance manager or as the CFO of the organization, you must be ethical when you're executing your duties. So the way we study it, or the way we analyze it, we come from the unethical behavior, unethical point of view, because these are the things that we don't want the CFO to promote. The CFO, the finance manager, shouldn't promote these. So those are the things that they shouldn't promote. So we want to look at what are the ethical, unethical issues. These issues, we are not going to explain or to over explain more on them, but just know they may appear. I made a video on financial management that is detailing some of these things. Like one, we have what we call money laundering. Money laundering. So here you are just expected to know what, you are just expected to know briefly about money laundering, whether you should promote it or you shouldn't promote. But this is just illegal money. Money came from unknown sources. So they may bring scenarios that maybe like what happened to FDC. They were complaining that money came in and they were not aware, where they didn't know the source of the money. So that's money laundering. But most of the times it is done internationally, that people get money from unknown sources and they bring it in the country. So it may cause, it is very dangerous. So we have other things like corruption. This one, self-explanatory, but most of the times when you are looking at, when you are giving points, at least make sure every time that corruption, you make corruption the last point. Because some of these other aspects, they are more related to corruption. Like I can talk about insider dealing. Insider dealing is when you use the information that is private to you for your personal benefit. For example, I may be the CFO, but I see that the company wants, maybe is trying to sell shares. And I know in 5 years' time, the company will be making very big profit because I'm the one who's looking at the financial statements. I know. And because I have access to that information, then I tell maybe my sister or my brother to actually come and buy shares. So I'm using the information that to enrich myself, because the information is just only private to me. Otherwise, no one would know that in 5 years' time the company would be more profitable. The other that we can talk about, conflict of interest. This one is more evident. Most of the times, if you see that you can't handle a case, it's like auditors are not allowed to audit companies that they have shares in. It's like you have almost 10% of the company's shares, 10% of the assets of the business, and you want to become the auditor. You can't, because you have already an interest in the business, meaning you will do whatever it takes for the business to be profitable. It's just like the same way I can be having a business, and then maybe my wife is an auditor, and I tell my wife to come and audit my business. What do you expect? Remember, you are supposed to be seen. You must be independent, but you must also be seen to be independent. There is no way someone is going to say, even if actually you exercise your whole independence, and no one will believe, because they will say, after all, the other one is the husband. The other, we may talk about like bribery. Of course, if you see bribery, corruption, they look to be the same. Bribery. But I told you that we can also talk about fraud. We can talk about doctoring accounts, manipulation of accounts. There are very many issues, but the key point is the fact that most of the times they bring these items in the case. It's you to identify that this was unethical, this was this, because they may just give you a story. Then in that story is when you'll be able to advise. Remember, we told you, even if it's not all about knowing these points. You may be knowing these points, but they are not applicable to the case. So if they have not mentioned the corruption, please don't bring it. You bring in pollution. Of course, we know pollution is, you are not allowed to pollute the environment. but don't bring it if it is not there in the case. So you can try to look at the exam past papers. As I said, you follow for the new examiner 2019 to date. Then you look at how the examiner has been examining these numbers, because they are there in that question 1. Most of the times they are there. So you look at how the examiner has been examining the things to do with ethics. But we always, and the other thing is the fact that most of the times they may just give you signs. They may not just give you these direct points, but they may give you symptoms that they may give you a case. Maybe I'm an accountant and I'm delaying payment of the supplier, yet there is no justifiable reason for me to delay the payment. Of course, when I look at that, it can call for bribery, that maybe I'm looking for someone to give me something so that I can approve the payment. It can also lead to corruption. So they may give you any case. Depending on the case, you analyze the case and based on that to make decision. So thank you for watching. Let's meet in the next video, as we are going to be looking at securities and the financial markets as our new topic. We try to look at, I know we looked at securities and financial markets and our financial management, but here we are just taking something. We take something to be a little bit advanced. We pick out something small and we talk about it, but that doesn't mean that they can't examine that number in full. That's why it is more advisable that if you have the notes for level 2, keep them. Read it through as you keep on advancing, because it is the other one that is going to prepare you for this advanced paper. So let's meet as we talk about securities and financial markets in the next video.